Hello, you're listening to the Raising the Bar podcast, brought to you by the Association of Gray's Inn Students. I am Elena Johnson, one of those students, and I'll be having a chat with barristers and wannabe barristers alike to demystify the route to the bar. Today we're chatting to Riaz Hussain QC from Atkin Chambers. He works in commercial law, specialising in construction, and was called to the bar in 2001 before being made a QC in 2016. Riaz is on the scholarships committee and is here to chat to us about scholarships. Welcome.
Thank you, Elena, and I'm particularly excited to be here because till a few days ago I didn't know what a podcast was. So I'm very proud to be actually
quick education
on one.
Now this might seem quite an obvious question, but it's one which, to be honest, a year and a half ago I wasn't too sure about myself. What is a Gray's Inn scholarship?
Well, Gray's Inn scholarships are money provided by Gray's Inn to students to put towards the BPTC fees and possibly the expenses relating to that year of their studies or 2 years. And it's important to understand that this is not a loan. This is money that you're given to spend on the course fees and your living expenses for the year. And there's a surprisingly large pot of money that Gray's Inn has on an annual basis reserved for the scholarships. I believe it's something around 1.2 million. And we give a fair amount of scholarships each year.
And there's quite a high success rate, isn't there, for scholarships? I think 55% of BPTC applications. That's pretty impressive. So as well as the success rate, what other reasons would you say there are for applying for these scholarships?
Well, I think the success rate and the amount of money that Gray's has is definitely one of the things. And I think it's 55% of those interviewed that actually get the scholarship. But I think around 2/3 of applicants are actually invited to an interview. So we give out typically about over 50 scholarships a year. And the first benefit obviously is the money. There's no secret that the costs of tuition at the bar are getting higher and higher. It's in some cases not feasible for people to work at the same time as undertaking the BPTC, certainly full time. So the scholarships really help towards that. The second thing I think is that it helps set you out as a candidate for pupillage. Certainly I know that many chambers will see an award of a scholarship as an accolade that an applicant has been assessed by barristers at Gray's Inn and found to have met the criteria, which are essentially about the potential to be a good barrister. So it really helps you stand out and solidify your application for pupillage. It's also a great test. The interview process itself and selling yourself as a candidate on the application form are really a good kind of primer for applying for pupillage itself. So I think those are really the three big benefits, I think.
So obviously we've spoken about the financial benefit and how sort of a stamp of approval. I'd like to emphasise really that it's, although it might seem a little bit cynical to sort of be speaking about the money, it really is such an important factor. And like you were saying, the course fees are so expensive. I know part of the reason I applied to Gray's was because I sort of worked out some statistics and worked out, how many scholarships they give compared to the applicants. Also, though, it's so important to, as I think you were sort of highlighting, the interview technique, and there are so many other benefits, including how friendly the atmosphere of Gray's is. And speaking about the interviews, I know I was a little bit scared, obviously, as you always are for an interview, but everyone was super friendly, super chill, very much wanting you to succeed in this interview and wanting you to get this scholarship. So if you are thinking of applying, I think that's really something to consider as well.
Yeah, I concur with that. I think there's a lot of camaraderie between the barristers on the scholarships committee. There's a wide mix of us in terms of a range of call and the areas that we work in. And I think that's deliberate, a good deliberate attempt by the education department to have a wide mix of people doing the interviews. But what it also means is that you will likely get exposed to at least one barrister who does the kind of work that you want to do. And that creates another opportunity for mentoring, networking, getting very sound advice from the people interviewing you as to what to do next.
When you're on the interview panel and you're talking to somebody who wants a scholarship, what sort of things are you looking for? What qualities are you hoping to see?
Well, we have 4 criteria for assessing candidates, and those are intellectual ability, the motivation to succeed as a barrister and practice, the potential to succeed as a barrister, which goes beyond your ability intellectually. So it's a lot about your advocacy.
Sort of something that you have, maybe just have.
Yeah, your advocacy skills as well that we try and bring out in the interview questions, and then finally marks for your personal traits and how you've been involved in the wider community as well. Right. So those are really the 4 criteria we look at. And the first part of doing that is obviously your written application. Grey's is unlike some of the other sets in that we do a paper sift before we invite candidates to interview. And I think a lot of young people applying will think, well, is this right for me? Am I better off going somewhere where I'm guaranteed an interview? That's a legitimate question, but what I've found is that a lot of people come to the conclusion that actually it's better to be assessed on paper and then selectively invited for interview, because that gives you
a better confidence, haven't you? Yeah.
Clearly, and it gives you a better understanding of whether there's anything, whether your paper application is good enough or not. So yeah, I think we started with the paper application. It's important to do justice to yourself in that. Obviously, your grades will be your grades, but I think we look at them contextually. We try very hard to do that. So, for instance, if you're the first person in your family to go to university, if you've had caring responsibilities while being at university, if you feel that a certain part of your grade doesn't do justice to your abilities, then I think you should bring that out in the form, and the form allows you to do that.
I'm really glad that you've brought that up, actually, because I was going to say, I was slightly wary when applying. I'm a first-generation student myself, state school educated. I think it's quite easy to have that, what some people call that imposter syndrome, where you sort of think, oh, this place isn't for me. Everyone else is going to be from a certain type of background. Why am I even applying? But I think instead of hiding those qualities, it really, really helped me to highlight them and to sort of show that, yes, I might not be from what you might stereotypically think of as a barrister's background, but I'm suited to this for reasons X, Y, Z. So I'm really glad you brought that up, and I'm glad that you've said as well, that's definitely a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's important before you do any application to sit down and have a think about what you're proud of in terms of your own achievements, rather than just try and answer each question kind of in a formulaic way. And you need to have that kind of idea and inner confidence, and then put it out there. You're selling yourself in that application. Yeah, do tell your story, tell your journey, and give a context to those grades. And the second thing is, don't lose sight of the fact that ultimately we're looking for good advocates. And advocacy obviously can come through mooting and debating and so on and so forth. But it can come through many everyday things, persuading someone to donate money to a particular cause, working with even young people and convincing them of one way or the other to do something. Think about ways in which you can kind of highlight the advocacy you've done. It could even be a paper you've written and defended at university. So do keep sight of that.
I think a really useful way I found to sort of work out how I matched the four criteria that you were talking about was I wrote them on a piece of paper, and I sort of made little mind maps underneath of all the things that I had done, and then I sort of matched the criteria to the experience that you've had. And often, like you said, you realise that things you think might be completely irrelevant are actually really helpful. Like if you've worked in Tesco, you might have really good people skills, and you might be able to chat to clients and get people on your side, be able to persuade them. So I think coming up with those sort of matching what you've done with the qualities can really help you and make you realise actually how good you are and how much you really do deserve a scholarship.
Definitely. I think finding the kind of good in what you've done, the qualities that kind of exhibits, even if it's just hard work. I mean, one really impactful sentence I found in an application was someone had put down a list of work experience they'd done, and they put down pot washer, washing pots, and they said, skills learnt, I learned that I didn't want to do this for the rest of my life, and I needed to work hard on my exams. Right. And I thought that was quite impactful. I mean, not suggesting that everyone says that, but no. It gives you an idea.
You suddenly have a lot of pot washers applying this year. Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, if you do have work experience, mini pupilages, you witnessed a case, and so on and so forth, the temptation is to put it down in the application, and you will be busy. You'll be making lots of applications at the same time. But before you come to interview, revisit that and try and have a good punchy sentence or 2 sentences for what you actually did. So often what we find is that a candidate will have said, I went to such and such chambers and I saw a really interesting case involving a football stadium. And then we'll say, okay, that becomes a talking point. So one of the interviewers will say, tell me the legal principles involved. And often this will be 3-4 years in the past, and the student will then maybe stumble and say, well, actually, I don't particularly remember that. So do try and refresh and remember what you've put in the application.
Again, a really helpful way that I found to do that actually was to sort of write down everything that you've put in the application. And then underneath there's something called the STAR technique. On the spot here, I can't exactly remember the science. Something like situation, task, action, reflection maybe. And you sort of write, what the situation was, what you had to do, what you did in relation to that, and then reflect upon it and what you learned. And I found that when I got to the interview, when somebody said, for example, what did you learn in this mini pupillage, I'd be able to think back to those notes and think, this is the situation, this is what I did. Right, it was, as you said, it's so easy to sort of write something down having forgotten about it completely. Unfortunately, a lot of interview technique is just preparation, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think what I tell certainly the young people, the people that come to, of all ages, that come to do work experience with me, is that just keep a diary of what you're doing, because 3-4 years down the line you will not remember, and you won't be able to give a succinct answer of what was the principle involved in the case you looked at, or what value you added to that. So I think that's quite important. But a large part of the interview exercise is that you're given a topic to look at and then make a presentation on, argue for or against it. And you get that kind of rapid fire questioning from the panel. It's not done in a scary way. I think I can say that fairly, even though I'm on the panel.
They're pretty friendly, yeah.
It's done in a way to allow you to excel, but it's also to test how well you stand your ground. And that can often make a big difference for someone who perhaps was okay but average on paper, but who has a standout interview and advocacy during the interview. That can really, really help.
And it's really helpful as well, isn't it, that to really think of arguments for and against something. When you see something on the news, a good tip I've heard is that you might see something on the news you don't actually have that many opinions on. It's not something you're actually that passionate about, but it's a really good exercise to think, if I'm arguing for this being correct, for example, I say this, if I'm arguing against, and to keep a little notebook with a little for and against for sort of different areas. And I was lucky in that by keeping up to date with the news in that way, something that I'd be reading about in the news came up in the interview. So I'd thought about it already. And it's definitely not a case of, as you were saying, it's about your advocacy. So obviously it's not giving arguments parrot fashion, but I think it's an element of confidence, sort of going in there feeling, actually, yes, I know what's going on in the world, I know how to argue about it. And even if something comes up that you've never heard of, you'll be able to think of something.
Yeah, I think we try to give questions that are quite accessible. So they would either be issues of ethics or policy that you will necessarily need to have a lot of background knowledge about. So that's useful. And a lot of the value added is not necessarily in quoting case law or statutes. We're not expecting that. It's not a legal question. No. But it's really in the clarity of your thought and then how you answer the questions and defend your proposition. So it's quite a fair test, I think. And it's really one of those that's intended to allow you to shine and show your best face.
And you've spoken about defending your proposition. If the interviewer starts arguing against what you've said, what would you recommend? Like, are you meant to just sort of stand back and go, oh yeah, you're correct? Or is it to sort of show that you're defending your...
Well, I think you have to engage with a question. We don't try and put you off. I hope we don't.
No, not at all.
But you're there arguing a case, so you certainly, it's not a chat. But at the same time, you've got to have that instinct of when to say, well, actually, in that situation, perhaps my proposition doesn't apply. However, that generally, I think it does. I mean, you've got to kind of, it's very similar to advocacy. You're very rarely going to go into a court and say, what I'm suggesting for my client must apply to everyone in the world, because you would be making your task a lot harder. So it's really drawing that judgment, but being firm, clear in terms of your thinking and your presentation.
And of course, another part of the application process is the financial form. I just want to have a brief chat about this because it took me so much longer than I thought it would. It was, so it's just a few questions. And I thought, a few numbers, put it in there, it'll be fine. But actually, I think if you really want to, particularly for the residential scholarship, which is something we haven't spoken about too much yet, it really helps to be able to have some sort of actual evidence for why you need the scholarship and why you, it essentially means testing. So I think one bit of advice I would say is leave enough time for that bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think what we often, well, not often, but sometimes surprisingly find is that very good candidates who do merit a higher award because of their financial circumstances will have just left that blank or not filled it out particularly well. And we do then write to them and say, look, can you provide more information? But it makes our task a lot easier and makes your prospects a lot better if you give it a really good go, engage with the questions that have been put to you. They're quite easy to kind of answer and respond to. And we very much have an ethos at Grays where the scholarships committee understands, I call it a crisis of social mobility and the financial dire straits that many people find themselves in. So the scholarships are still very much merits based. You have to have that potential to succeed contextually, but there is a minimum award that everyone gets, which I believe is now £5,000. But anything on top, and we, our average scholarship is over £19,200 at the moment.
Which is so helpful for the course fees. And
so all of that will be done based on the financial information you provide. We actually do it in two stages. So first we decide who is to be awarded a scholarship, which is merits based. And then the committee sits, or a subset of the committee sits and decides who gets more than 5,000 and how much. And it's at that stage that we have to make some pretty quick decisions and be quite decisive. And we really need that financial information to assist us.
And one thing that we've just touched on, but to talk a bit more about, is the residential scholarships. And that can really, really help when you need it financially and also for other reasons. So if you should briefly tell us, what are the residential scholarships?
So the residential scholarships, I understand, I've not been involved in actually selecting people for them, allow you to actually reside in Gray's Inn with other residential scholars, which living in central London will save you a heap of money. It's
amazing.
But also you'll be in the heart of the legal world. You won't be very far. You'll be a hop, skip and jump away from your bar school. So that will make your life easier. But the other important thing is that you will be really enriched by your contact with the inn. And I think that's one of the main criteria for offering the residential scholarship, is that we're looking for people who will be happily involved in various aspects of the life of the inn, whether that be the student governance of the inn bodies, or getting involved in the inn's various social initiatives and so on, which are again great fun but a fantastic way to meet senior barristers and network. I don't think anyone does them with that motive at the front of their mind, but it's a great kind of byproduct, a natural byproduct of being involved in the inn.
I can really attest for everything you just said, actually. Yeah, I'm a residential scholar myself, and it's absolutely incredible to be living in Gray's Inn, and everyone is really, really friendly. They really want you to get involved. I'm doing the Christmas play this year, which would be quite interesting. I've had a couple of rehearsals already underway. It's amazing to live in central London. You don't pay rent as a residential scholar, which again, obviously in central London is absolutely amazing. And all of the people who also live here, we all get on really well. It's a really nice community. And I'd really recommend, if anybody is thinking about applying, to just apply, because I didn't really expect to get it. I think at the moment there are 14 places. We're looking to expand. So hopefully there'll be more in the near future.
I think it's important to emphasise as well that it's a proper grown-up flat. It's not.
It's lovely.
It's not a dormitory or.
I was quite surprised. I was used to student accommodation, and they change the flats every so often, so it could be rented to a barrister, it could be rented to you. So it's pretty lovely. Yeah,
definitely. It's a win-win.
Yeah, so definitely apply, because I wasn't really thinking I'd get one, but just go for it. So I think the last thing to really chat about is the next steps. So if you are thinking of applying for a scholarship, the deadline for BPTC scholarships is Friday 1st of November 2019, and the GDL scholarships open in March 2020 and close on the 1st of May 2020. So next steps, I imagine, get started as early as possible with your applications.
Tattoo that deadline on your forehead. Don't miss it. Practice, prepare, have a good go at the application. If you have any questions, always you can ring up the education department. There's always someone there willing to kind of assist you. We really want the application process to be as open and easy as possible. And yeah, do some serious thinking. Don't treat it as just a form to fill in. Try and sell yourself in the best way possible, and also set out what your needs are and why you need the money as well.
Get everyone to read it. Get anyone to read it at all. Actually, I think it does help getting someone to read it who doesn't really know you, and then asking them how they'd summarise you having read your form. That's always quite a useful one. So yeah, as you said, tattoo it on your forehead and don't miss it. Perfect.
Yes, definitely.
Well, thank you so much for coming to chat to us today. That was really interesting, and I'm sure everyone will find it really useful.
It's a pleasure.
Riaz Hussain QC, and thank you for listening.